I wanted to read from my book that is coming out soon, tentatively called Simple Wealth, and this will be the intro. Prior to my current job as CFO of HHS, which is one of the largest privately owned companies in the Central Texas area, I was a wealth manager for Wells Fargo Private Bank for 9 years. Prior to that, I was a estate planning attorney for 6 years. So I spent a total of 15 years of my early career in the wealth management industry. I have met thousands of wealthy clients, learned from them, and have become a millionaire, so somewhat wealthy myself. My work experience and my personal saving and investing gives me a unique perspective on what works and what doesn't work in building wealth. Our world today is filled with get-rich-quick schemes and bad advice that'll leave you broke if you're not careful. Almost every wealthy family follows the same general principles in building their wealth. These themes show up over and over and can't be denied as being instrumental in wealth building for the majority of folks. The major problem people have today in trying to build wealth is that they don't follow these principles in an effort to take shortcuts. The results are usually disastrous. Why do people take shortcuts to wealth creation? Part of it is human nature. Since the dawn of time, humans have shown a remarkable inclination towards easy money. My favorite financial advice book, and other advice book for that matter, is the Bible. And look at what King Solomon says in Proverbs 13:11. Wealth gained hastily will dwindle, but whoever gathers it little by little will increase it. King Solomon was one of the wealthiest men in the history of the world. His wisdom should be heeded by all of us, as it emphasizes one of the most important traits in building wealth: patience. Another reason people look for shortcuts is that sometimes it seems like it works. In our modern world, we've seen companies like Uber, Facebook, and Google that have made people millionaires in a short period of time, either through investment or stock options. We also see people becoming rich buying things like Bitcoin, CBD oil, etc. I want to start by saying, and I'll say this over and over in this book, it's absolutely true that people get rich through these approaches. I review them all in this book and talk about the principles that allow ultra-high investment returns. However, it's important to realize that the vast majority of people who invest in startups, cryptocurrencies, alternative investments end up losing all their money. The reason is that most people don't build the financial foundation that's necessary to successfully invest for outsized returns. That might seem silly, but it's an important point that holds true for all the wealthy people I've come across over the years. Most people never build the base and fall victim to get-rich-quick schemes. Take crypto, for instance. There are certainly people who've made money in crypto, and it could well be an important asset class someday. However, for most people, it's a trap. In fact, it was such a large problem with people borrowing money to buy crypto that major banks such as Chase, Bank of America, Capital One, Discover actually banned people from buying crypto on credit cards in 2018. This wasn't from altruism. They realized that people were maxing out their cards, betting on various cryptocurrencies to appreciate, and this represented a risk that these poor fools wouldn't be able to pay the money back. I'm not immune to silly investments myself. In 2010, I invested about $5,000 in various penny stocks based on my thorough research of these companies, their markets, and their potential. I basically lost all of that $5,000 within a year. Why? I was making the mistake of speculating rather than investing. I didn't have any outsized knowledge in the area in which I was investing, which is an important concept I will talk about in investing for outsized returns throughout this book. Speculating versus investing is an important theme, and a lot of people confuse the two. Investing is a surefire way to wealth that requires discipline and a long-term approach. Speculating is betting on something going up or down without any consideration of or protection from the downside of risk. Most speculators will lose everything, and it's important to avoid this disaster. I also want to use this concept of speculation versus investing to drive home a point. Many people foolishly get into speculation because they see others successful at it. What they don't realize is that the person having the success is not actually speculating, they're investing. What's the difference? The difference is knowledge. If you have some outsized knowledge about a specific investment, market, company, product, etc., then you're not speculating. You're investing in an arbitrage due to the mispricing of assets. There's still risk because there's always risk, but due to your information that the market as a whole does not have, there's a good probability that the price of the assets will correct and you'll make money. Many people investing in specific assets are speculating because they aren't honest with themselves that they really have no special knowledge. Ultimately, investing is trying to predict the future value of an asset and determine if right now it's underpriced or overpriced. If you don't have the correct information about the current state of an asset, the market, the competitive forces, etc., you're bound to lose. If investing in the asset at hand is not your day job, it's very likely that you don't have the knowledge necessary and are in fact speculating. I'm talking about something different than speculating. I'm talking about growing wealth. I'm going to outline how to develop the financial base necessary to become wealthy and eventually have your assets earn enough income so you won't have to through work. I'm going to talk about how to set up your family for generations of success, as I feel that that's an important topic as well. We as a society don't take the generational aspect of wealth creation seriously enough. We don't appreciate the importance of things like two-parent households, education, and stability on growing wealth. Poverty is almost always the result of a lack of generational development within a family structure that makes it impossible, or nearly impossible, for members of that family to develop the skills necessary to build wealth. What you see across America is different economic playing fields. Right now, many interpret these playing fields as built on race, talk about things like oppression and systemic racism, but these fields are not the result of race at all. They're the consequence of the deterioration of the family, which is the fundamental base of wealth development. Without a family infrastructure, you're going to have a much more difficult time building the same level of wealth as other families. Just as I'm going to have a more difficult time building the same level of wealth as Donald Trump's children. I make that obvious hyperbolic comparison to illustrate a point. There's a spectrum of wealth creation that every family has developed that must be taken into consideration when discussing building wealth. You and I are on some playing field that's the result of forces that preceded us. Many on the left end of the political spectrum look at this reality and seek to tear down the higher end playing field through taxes and other means of confiscation. But this is a counterproductive path. The reality in America is that any attempts to level the playing field through confiscation only end up enriching a small subclass of wealthy elites. Does that sound crazy? Let's investigate the recent government responses to the COVID-19 pandemic. Boiled down to its essence, the government gave cash in various forms and through various programs to Americans affected by the shutdown. Where did this cash go? Ultimately, it didn't stay in the bank accounts of ordinary Americans. Rather, it transferred to large corporations like Amazon in the form of spending, Facebook and Google in the form of marketing to increased attention paid by people staying at home, and other similar companies. Government action leads the rich to get richer as temporary assistance finds its way up the food chain. That's not wealth creation, it's confiscation, and it's doomed to failure. Wealth creation can only come from when you decide to build wealth and impact generations of your family that came after you. You can't have much of an impact on American society at large, and you are wasting your time and energy thinking about the way things ought to be. Similarly, politicians aren't coming to save you and your family or anyone else. They're just blowing sunshine up your derriere. You are the only person who can change your present condition. You also have no business focusing on how well or poorly others are doing, other than being a good example yourself and cutting a check from your checkbook to assist those in need as you see best. You are responsible for which economic playing field your children and grandchildren inhabit. There's no one else who's going to put them on a different playing field. It's up to you. The emphasis on you and your in the preceding paragraph is to emphasize that the only person who has any sort of positive control on the economic condition of you and the emphasis on you and your in the preceding paragraph is to emphasize that you are the only person who has any sort of positive control on the economic condition of you and your family. How well other people do has no effect on you other than allowing others to buy more items from you or the business where you work. Wishing others would do worse than you is no solution to your present condition. Jealousy is a primal urge that's been around since the dawn of humanity. The biblical story of Cain and Abel tells you all you need to know about that subject. Cain wasn't willing to sacrifice what was necessary, and his jealousy drove him to kill his brother. The saga continues today, but the lack of sacrifice and taking out on your brother man or woman won't work any better for you than it did for Cain. You and I need to work on our own sacrifice in one way or another. The topic of this book is the sacrifices you need to make to become financially independent and make your family better off. You are at a certain economic level and on a certain playing field. That's true for all of us, and you can't change where you start, nor can any politician. But whatever economic level you're playing on right now, and whatever your family situation, this book will put you on the right path to changing things. You'll learn the tools necessary to improve upon where you are today. Hopefully you're willing to make the sacrifices necessary to build a better playing field for you and your family. Growing wealth takes patience. It won't happen overnight, but it will happen if you follow the steps outlined in this book. What you'll get immediately is the satisfaction of knowing you're on the right track for becoming financially independent. You'll lose the fear of losing everything and the weight of having to constantly worry about money. Your stress levels will go down, your relationships will improve, and your overall level of happiness will increase. Most Americans will never become wealthy, and that's a shame because America is still the land of opportunity for everyone. Whatever playing field you're on now, if you're standing in the borders of America or are an American, you have a unique opportunity that no one else in the world has. You can participate in the most vibrant economy the world has ever known and benefit from wealth being created all over the place. Let's get to the root why most Americans aren't wealthy, which I'm going to define as being on the road to financial independence. The biggest two reasons Americans aren't wealthy is overspending and debt. It's really that simple. Most Americans trade stuff and things for financial independence and security. It's a horrible cycle of overspending, credit card balances, car loans, student loans, etc. As King Solomon also said, the borrower is slave to the lender. The reality is that so many Americans are slaves, trading their paychecks for stuff they've bought long ago. The pleasure's worn off, but the payments and pain continue. This is true whatever economic playing field you started on. It doesn't matter if you grew up dirt poor or in a mansion. If you spend more than you make and incur debt, you're losing. For many Americans, the cycle continues until they reach retirement age and they have nothing saved. It's astonishing how many people reach 60, 70, 80 years of age with absolutely no money. But it's because they played the same game of living rich on borrowed money that many people in your neighborhood are doing right now. Then they have to rely on their kids and a meager Social Security check from Uncle Sam. Not a pretty picture and not a good way to spend your social years, your golden years. And the problem is that the cycle continues and goes on in families. Broke parents raise broke children, with families living in constant chaos and subject to the whims of every job loss and economic cycle. It's up to you to get out of debt and live a prosperous life, not only for yourself, but for your children and future generations as well. Change your playing field. Financial responsibility is a learned behavior, and it'll be difficult for you if you grew up in a family with financially irresponsible parents. However, you can be the one who breaks the cycle for your future generations. You can build your family's new playing field. What a legacy. Financial responsibility has further implications in society. As I write this, the COVID-19 virus has exposed the financial fragility of every American. What is amazing is that the emergency handouts, yes, they're handouts or welfare, let's call it what it is, were necessary for millions who couldn't go for 2 weeks, much less 3 months, which is a goal we'll talk about later, without an income. As a result, the federal government was forced to print trillions of dollars out of thin air, which will inevitably lead to inflation and financial calamity down the road. As I mentioned earlier, it's also going to make the wealthy wealthier. I mentioned those handouts going to a small segment of elite companies earlier. In addition, printing trillions of borrowed dollars will keep interest rates artificially low for a year. While this will make real estate investors like myself rich because I'll be able to borrow long-term loans at incredibly low fixed rates for years to come, it won't benefit Americans as a whole. Now, you can blame politicians for what's going on. That's fair. The legislation that came out in the wake of COVID was poor and will harm America. Further, more Americans will become dependent on the government for their economic security, which will inevitably lead them to become poorer and more dependent. This will be a vicious cycle that will likely last for at least a generation. Don't let this happen to you and your family. Solutions to your financial condition and your family's playing field are not going to come from any politicians or political ideas. politicians, both sides, are crap when it comes to to financial policy and lifting people out of poverty. It will only come when you change your situation and when we as Americans demand financial prudence of one another and stop the cycle of overspending and debt. It will only come when we learn to provide for ourselves and not rely on the government. With that diatribe over, let's turn to the greatest principles of wealth building that will make you rich and change your playing field. More to come.